Packers fans, stay up to date on all of your Packers news this season via our newsletter. You can sign up for the PackersNews.com and more Journal Sentinel newsletters by clicking on the link in the brief field of this video. Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood here from Lambeau Field, where the Packers have wrapped up with a Week 3 win. Guys, as I said to our colleague Pete Doherty when we were doing our video recap, I said, we may not have had Taylor Swift here today. No team scored 70, but still a pretty impressive day in the world of the NFL. The Packers complete a 17-point fourth-quarter comeback for only the second time in 104-year franchise history. Kind of impressive when you look at it like that. Spoon, I'll start with you. We're going to get into a lot of the details of this game, but just your initial impression of this game, and was there a point where you went, holy crap, they might actually win this thing? Because they were down, I think, with 14 with 11 minutes to go.
I mean, I didn't think they were ever out of it. I thought at the start of the second half, if they just got back to the running game, tried to kind of dink and dunk a little bit, that they'd have a chance to get back into it, especially after Derek Carr got hurt. Then, that gave the Packers an in, because Jameis Winston hasn't played for a while. And I don't know. It was just such a slog of a game that I never got the sense that anybody was going to run away with it. I think the fact that the Packers held New Orleans to a field goal at the end of the first half mattered a lot, because I think if they score a touchdown there, then it's a really different game. And, I don't know what to say. I still really don't know how they came back, because it was combination of penalties. It was, constant fade balls. I really don't know. As I sit here right now, I'm not really sure how they won.
That's exactly what Matt LaFleur said. He said the fourth quarter was a blur and he doesn't really remember it, and he has to go back and watch the tape. Yeah. Ryan, what was your initial impression from that win?
Well, it felt a lot like the other time in Packers history that the Packers came back from at least 17 points. The 2018 opener against the Bears, which was 20-0. So I guess Aaron Rodgers slightly outdid Jordan Love there, but I don't think Packers fans care. They came back by Jordan Love doing whatever it took. This was like the inverse of last week. We have seen Jordan Love play beautiful football. Last week, he throws 3 touchdowns to rookies, no picks. He's leading the league in NFL passer rating through 2 games. And then he gets a really feisty Saints defense. I mean, this Saints defense is nasty. And it's 11 straight games now dating back to last year. They haven't allowed more than 20 points because the Packers had 18 today. But he won ugly. And sometimes that's what you need to do. Screw everything else. Just make whatever play you can and get it done. We hadn't seen that. And so, it's the inverse. A beautiful football last week with a brutal loss. Ugly football this week, but winning football. And that's it's a very, who knows what happens from it. It's week 3 of his first season as starter, but it's a very significant moment for him in this franchise to see that he can do that.
Let's get slightly hyperbolic and put the cart before the horse here, because Pete on our recap said, he was like, he even prefaced it with, I'm hesitant to say this, but, and he said, that reminded me of early Favre years. Just, I was wondering what your reaction would be.
Who?
Just, willing to play ugly and do what it took to win. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I got to disagree from the standpoint of he did do whatever was necessary, but he didn't do it with, like, eye-opening plays. Everything Brett Favre did in his early career was either a disaster or it was an eye-opening play. I mean, there was no in-between with him. The thing I thought about Love's performance, he did get it done. And that's huge. That's big. But I also noticed that we saw a lot of the things he needs to get better at. His accuracy is not great. His deep ball, we've gone out over that ad nauseum. There's nothing more we can really say about that. For all the fade balls that they threw in this game, maybe 3 of them were on target, maybe a little more than that, but they just kept going to it. And I guess finally he threw, the game winner, which is when you want it in the clutch for it to hit. But I just think it showed a lot of what he still has to work through to become a really quality quarterback.
I didn't think his accuracy was terrible. I mean, he threw the dime to Jaden Reed in the corner of the end zone that Jaden Reed dropped, and then he comes back the very next play and he underthrows wide open Malik Heath on the next one. The deep ball for me is where it's got to get better. And for what it's worth, Luke Musgrave said after the game that he's got to make a straighter, more vertical route there, and not. And I don't know if by doing that, if Love's pass was where Musgrave should have been, but I'm a little dubious.
That sounds good.
Fall on your sword.
He could go straight. I think on
a
perfect angle, and that thing's going over his head.
I think so too.
Yeah. See,
I'm sorry.
I want to go. You're fine. I want to go back and watch that play because LaFleur said the same thing. He said a different angle on that play, and Musgrave catches that.
I'm a little dubious that I even asked Luke Musgrave like could it have been both? Could it have been maybe you got to run a better route and it was overthrown? But he said that it needed to be a better route. But we have not seen Jordan Love hit a deep ball really yet,
right.
And I don't know that it's just going to get better when Christian Watson does return, maybe Thursday night, because deep balls it takes time. It's not an arm strength thing. I mean, for goodness sakes, we know he's got the arm to do it. It takes time, and I think it's going to take Jordan Love some time. There.
Well, we have to define what a deep ball is. So the ball he threw to Romeo Doubs on the sideline, that was a good throw. Doubs had to go down and get it, but, I mean, it was in a place where nobody else could get it.
Yeah.
The ball to Jaden Reed, deep across the middle, was that 30 yards? That was a pretty good throw.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great throw, but it was a good throw. Throwing into triple coverage was not his best pick.
One to Torrey.
It wasn't a pick.
Yeah. My complaint with him was like there were some outs where he left the ball too far inside. Like he gave the defender a chance to stick his arm in there and break it up. And that's where his accuracy has to kind of pick up a little bit. Those are the kind of balls that win games, and would have made it a lot easier today on him if they had hit it. But the thing I'm really impressed with was he finally is using his legs. The guy is pretty adept at running and made a pretty nice move on a
savvy too.
Yeah, he knew what he could get.
Talking about down the left sideline.
Yeah, and he's a big guy. I'm not as nervous about him taking a hit as some people are. It's not like Justin Fields. He's a big dude,
That scamper down the left sideline, it was 24 yards? I think.
Yeah, I think
that he got a hell of a pickup from Romeo Doubs too, or a block on that play.
Yeah, he did. It was a good block there.
Yeah, he got that really kind of sprung him. He already had the first down at that point. But he
smartly identified the guy needed to juke as a fat lineman, so he just took a step around him, really. Otherwise, he could have gone out of bounds.
Yeah.
But he's like, hey, I can get around this guy.
Cassidy, you mentioned the Favre comparison, right? And
that was Pete. Let's put that on Pete.
Yeah, that Pete had mentioned it. But the one, and I'm not saying that Jordan Love played like Brett Favre. I didn't cover Brett Favre. I can't say that. I don't know. But from a symmetry standpoint, this is the first time since 1992 that a Packers quarterback has started a home opener that wasn't Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, and it was week 3 of that 92 season against the Cincinnati Bengals when Brett Favre replaces Don Majkowski, and they're down 20-10 in the fourth quarter, and he rallies a comeback, and that was the genesis of it all. I mean, that's what ignited 3 decades of a QB dynasty here in Green Bay. So for it to be week 3 again, it might just be a footnote to history. Who knows? But from a symmetry standpoint, that's kind of interesting.
The script is scripting.
The script is scripted.
The script is scripted. They shot themselves in the foot, though, so many times. I mean, Spoon, as you said, this game could have been a lot different. Scoreboard could have looked a lot different if they had hit a couple balls. And actually, I was about to go to penalties, but I want to go back to something else.
Oh.
I'm all over the place. You mentioned the fade. Matt LaFleur was asked about that, too. Do you think part of that was just that's what we have available in our arsenal today, given no Christian Watson and no Aaron Jones?
I think it was a reaction to how the Saints play. So they're going to play tight, bump and run coverage all the time, man to man. You got to beat them deep. Once in a while, someone has to beat them deep, and you have to keep trying because they're not giving you anything short. They're killing you at the line of scrimmage. Those guys could not get off the line of scrimmage very well. Even Dobbs, and I'm surprised because he's so quick at the line of scrimmage. That's his strength. But boy, those dudes get up there and they jam you and they grab you, and it's really funny. I was asking Dontavian Wicks about that, and he's like, yeah, you got to kind of get used to it, and then you have to start playing physical back. And he said, the ref told me, you just got to be physical with them.
Don't play nice.
He did. He was basically telling them, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're going to give you some leeway because this is the way these guys play.
Yeah.
It becomes the norm in the game. They do it so often that pretty soon the refs see that and they're like, oh, yeah, well, that's normal. They're just grabbing and pushing, and that's the way it goes. And they don't care about penalties. They're like, Jeff Duncan had a great story about that, where they're like, hey, pass interference, so what? We'll pick the ball off on the next play.
It's one way to look at it.
Yeah, and today the refs weren't calling that much until the fourth quarter.
That's a very New Orleans mindset.
What's funny is of all the penalties that went against the Packers, I think it was like 11 for 90 yards in the first three quarters. Then Jaden Reed gets away with a blatant OPI where he just shoves him, and there was no rhyme or reason to Romeo Dobbs ran a deep route down the right side and clear defensive pass interference, got bumped like 15, 20 yards downfield, no penalty. But then it's just, I thought it was kind of funny.
The guy a little bit, with an arm bar, it was.
I asked Samari Torrey about it too, and he said at one point, because he's who was in that triple coverage, which that was triple coverage. It probably shouldn't have been thrown anyways. But he said that at one point they kind of were all on the sidelines and they're like, okay, they're not calling anything and they're going to play like this. We've got to play back. And that they just had that conversation between all the wide receivers, like, okay, fine, we're going to do it back. That being said, the Wicks DPI that he drew that was like a 45-yard pickup, I don't know if y'all saw Darnell Savage on the sidelines. That was a late flag. It took them a few seconds to throw that flag for the DPI. I thought Darnell Savage was going to come off the sidelines if they didn't throw it. He's like jumping up and down, asked him about it afterwards, and he was like, it was about time. He's like, of course, as a defender, I shouldn't want DPI, but he said those Saints guys were doing it all game. And he said, I didn't know if one was ever going to get called.
Yeah, I think it's a little troublesome that they couldn't get off the line. Like, you got to have one guy. It was always Devontae Adams could get off the line of scrimmage. Jordy Nelson could get off the line of scrimmage. Cobb, in his best day, could get off the line of scrimmage. It's like Watson's the only guy who can really make them pay for that kind of coverage. And so, they miss him in a big, big way. And, 3 games, it's hard to believe they're 2-1 without him and Aaron Jones in 2 games.
Well,
those 3 games.
That's part of what made this comeback just so improbable. They don't have Christian Watson. They don't have Aaron Jones, which is just becoming a bigger and bigger absence the more A.J. Dillon touches the football. They don't have David Bakhtiari. They don't have Elton Jenkins. They don't have Jair Alexander. Yeah, okay, the Saints in the second half down the stretch didn't have Derek Carr, who the Packers are beating up pretty good when he was in the game. Clearly, he left the game with a shoulder injury. But my goodness, the Packers were without so much of their team. And that's, that might speak to penalties, because when you really stress the depth of your team, you're going to have more penalties. And 2, it leads to ugly football, and that's why Jordan Love just had to chuck it and do whatever he could, because he's missing so much of his offense. So that makes it even more impressive.
And they lost Devondre. Don't forget they lost
Devondre Campbell. Yep.
And then they lost Jair Alexander's backup,
Carrington
Valentine.
Yep.
So
it was good they had called up Corey Ballantyne from the practice squad yesterday.
Yeah, that kind of gave you an idea that Alexander. Well, we should talk about the injured guys eventually.
Yeah,
but,
we will.
I'll wait on it.
Yeah, I have a plan, Spoon. I'm in charge here, not you.
No, you're not.
I'm just in the middle.
I am
Spoon?
ultimately.
I'm just in the middle.
Spoon's always so focused on his live blog that I try not to bother him during the game. The one thing I said to him today, he turned around and got so sassy with me. And I was just
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, she's like, oh, are they booing?
No, that's not what I said.
Yes, you did.
No, I said, are they saying Luke?
No, you said,
No,
are
I
they
did not.
booing? Yes, you did.
Check the
and
tape.
I'm like,
Check the tape.
Duh,
I
it's
said-
Luke.
I said, are they saying Luke?
No.
Just to be sure. Check the tape. Jesus don't like a liar.
He had a
Spoon.
game though. Luke Musgrave had a game now. He was okay. How about I feel like Packers fans have been like slowly, desperately crying out loud for a John Kuhn. You know, someone that they can say Kuhn.
Yeah.
Since he retired, and it didn't take them long to go with the Luke.
I know they fired it up pretty quickly.
It was immediate, yeah.
Which is, it's obvious that's what they were doing.
It's going to be interesting to see if he is ever run after the catch guy. Because now he just looks like a giraffe, you know. He just, or like a young giraffe. And then he can't really keep his
giraffe?
feet ever. Yeah,
that
you ever
what you
seen a young giraffe
Yeah.
and their feet are splayed out and they can't run very fast. And that's kind of, I mean, he's good without the ball. You know,
Yeah.
he's really good without the ball. But when he gets the ball,
He just-
all of a sudden he becomes baby giraffe.
They also are using him so much more on like deep seams than I thought they would, and that's they haven't been able to hit it.
Well,
because of
cover
the
you
T-ball.
get cover two. You got to run that guy
Mhm.
down the middle, and that's what they were running, and that's what he hit on that play that Love, overthrew
Overthrew
him.
him.
So yeah, that's the solution if you can do that, and you got to make teams pay on that. And that would have been a huge play if you did.
Let's talk about the penalties. They were many. They were great. They were atrocious at times. Not saying a bad call, but just like what are you thinking on the field? You can't make that. You can't do that. How many did you say? Like 9 for 90?
11 for 90.
11 for 90.
But none
There
down the
were-
stretch, which was amazing.
Right. But there were pre-snap penalties. There were dead ball penalties. There were in-progress play penalties. I mean, is that more the sign of an undisciplined team or a young team? And keep in mind, the very first penalty was an unnecessary roughness call on Kenny Clark.
You know, Matt LaFleur made a interesting comment in his post-game comments that I was kind of wondering myself, and I don't know if it's directly tied to what I was wondering. But he said that they need to go back and look at some of the things that they're having these young guys do and make adjustments accordingly. In the past 2 weeks, we have seen an extremely young. I think we've seen Matt LaFleur have a hell of a lot of fun. Like, he is having fun with his playbook. He's got a flea flicker in there. He's got whatever insane, crazy fourth down play, that gadget play that looked really fun. Just toss it to Emmanuel Wilson, throw it back to Jordan Love. An incredibly well-designed route from Dontavian Wicks, get wide open, cuts to the right and then across the field left. That's a fun play. But when you have a really young team and you're throwing the kitchen sink at them, you might get their head spinning a little bit. And it's not like only young guys are making penalties. Like Kenny Clark had a personal foul penalty. I mean, you've had
Very costly.
yeah, very bad. You've had veterans make penalties too. But with a young team, when you throw the kitchen sink, get their head spinning, you might see more penalties. So I wonder if he's going to go back to the simplistic basics this shortened week and just say, okay, just take what's there, which, from Jordan Love on down, they've done a pretty good job of, and not overload so much, which might be against Matt LaFleur's nature because, like anyone, he likes having fun. He looks like he's got a pretty decent offense schematically, and he's having fun with it. But I wonder if there's a push and pull there.
To that point, though, it's easy when the offense is not clicking to blame it on the coaching or the play calling. Do you think that's an issue? To me, even in the first half tonight or the first half today when things weren't clicking, I felt like the play calls weren't the problem. The guys were in position. They just weren't making the plays.
Well, there's a lot of things we don't know about play calling, So I'm always a little bit leery of going after play calling. I think there's times they lose sight of running the ball. I thought they could have run Dillon, even though he wasn't doing that well. The effect of running him is pretty important. And I thought, they kind of a little bit got into that in the second half. But I just got the sense today that everything he tried was like not working, because he couldn't get anybody open. If you can't get any open, I don't know what else you do.
Yeah. Speaking of Dillon, he's, of course, being asked to pick up more slack with Aaron Jones still out. But at one point today, the drive where they scored the touchdown for the first time in the fourth quarter, A.J. Dillon was not on the field for that entire drive. And at one point, they had goal to go 4 times.
4 shots from the 2.
And A.J. Dillon wasn't in there.
Says a lot.
And he was on the drive before, and he entered a later drive. But that was all Emmanuel Wilson and Patrick Taylor. In fact, a lot of the fourth quarter was Emmanuel Wilson and Patrick Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make too much of it, but is there something to be made of that there?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, A.J. Dillon is supposed to be your number one back right now.
Yeah.
And I would say he's number one by default instead of number one by, of course, he's 1A, 1 and 1A. I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know why he's not the same guy.
The burst isn't there. I don't know where it went, but we've seen the burst there before. I still go back to that first game that he had against the Titans where he outrushed Derrick Henry. He had a lot of burst for a big man that night. I don't know where it went. I don't know when it went somewhere, but it's not there.
He broke a tackle today, and we were like, I think that's the first time I've seen him break a tackle this season.
Yep.
And
best play for him is when he can keep his feet and all the linemen can push him in a pile, because he's able to keep his feet because his legs are so strong. And then they push him for a 6-yard gain or something like that. But, yeah, we haven't seen him break into the open field once at all.
But it was telling beyond measure that they had 4 cracks from the 2-yard line. Mm-hmm. And not only did he not touch the football, he didn't touch the field.
Yeah.
That is saying a lot.
Not even as a decoy.
Yeah.
So something to watch, especially if Aaron Jones is out again on Thursday. Let's flip to the other side of the ball real quick. Rashan Gary with a hat trick, his first 3-sack game of his career, including one that knocked Derek Carr out of the game. He actually went to a local hospital to check on his shoulder. Jameis Winston came in for the rest of the game. The guys in the locker room, of course, all said, things didn't change that much from Carr to Winston. They're going to say that. It felt like things changed a little, at least. But that being said, they had actually been able to keep Carr somewhat contained earlier in the game. Of the 17 points, the defense only gave up 10 of those. One of those, of course, was a punt return, which we'll get to in a little bit. All of that to say was this pass rush continuing to take a step forward? How much of what you saw today was, I guess, what you expected to see from this pass rush, especially once it and look more at what they did versus Derek Carr than Jameis Winston?
I asked Kenny Clark about Rashan Gary, and I asked kind of a question that wasn't a question. It was safe to say Rashan Gary's back to normal, and 3 sacks in a game. But what Kenny Clark said was, he's been back to normal. Like, he just got home today. Mm-hmm. But you look at his first 2 games, when he's been out there, they had the pitch count on him a little bit, but when he's been out there, he's been Rashan Gary. He's been beating everybody. And today he just happened to get home with 3 sacks, which is how sacks work. I mean, you want pressures, and then sacks come in bunches. And so, it's safe to say that he's Rashan Gary, and it's only 3 games back from torn ACL. That's really impressive.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised New Orleans didn't double him after the first 2 sacks, because I kind of kept an eye on every time he'd come in the game. And he's not playing a full complement of snaps yet either. So, he's got to be leading the league in sacks per play. It's been pretty impressive. He's got the strength. He's got the get off. should be a great matchup, against that Detroit offensive line on Thursday night. So, when he starts playing even more, that changes. But the one constant, I think, through all three games is that they've had a pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a really good pass rush. And there were some times where I thought Carr had more time than he should have, but, I think it was sufficient.
The pass rush is why I thought they would win this game. And I guess in a way you could say, like, it's really what kind of... I mean, of course, you've got to look at what the offense did in the fourth quarter, but defense made some stands when they had to, held them to a field goal at the end of the first half. If that had been a touchdown, we're looking at a different game here.
They gave up 10 points on defense.
Exactly.
That's pretty good.
And when you look at maybe what the secondary did too, the first half, it felt to me like they were still kind of playing off a little bit, kind of like more like what they did in Atlanta. And Rasul Douglas even said that the Saints in the first half were running a lot of the same stuff that Atlanta did, like what they had seen Atlanta do. And once they were able to finally shut that down and force them back into what they do, that's when the defense could really take over. And then you saw, midway through the third, especially the fourth, the secondary come up and started make those tackles again like they did versus the Bears. Rudy Ford ended the game as the leading tackler. I think Darnell Savage was number 3. They both had like 8 and 7 respectively. So is that kind of how this defense needs to play? And do you think we'll see more teams try to stretch them out again like Atlanta did and like the Saints tried to do in the first half?
It was really telling to me in the second half, especially when the Saints started not only trying to target the wide zone, but getting some success there. Because this is not, and we talked about it before the game, this is not a Saints offense that should have a lot of success without Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams on the wide zone. But secret's out. It's on film. The Falcons exposed it to everybody. And even the Saints, even this Saints group, got some success there. Yeah, you're going to see the Detroit Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs do that a lot Thursday night.
Yeah.
A lot. That's not going to go away anytime soon until they prove that they can stop it.
How do you stop it with this personnel?
Be more disciplined on the edges. They still have to play contain. Now, I didn't watch a ton of the outside linebackers, but I know early on Enigbari gave up a corner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that happened over and over again, but teams are going to run away from their front three because that's the strength of their team. Those 3 guys are hard to deal with. So, yeah, we're going to see it until they stop it. And I don't know. It might mean bringing a safety down, or it might mean bringing Campbell or Quay Walker up to the line of scrimmage more often.
I started taking note of it, and I would want to go back and watch the game just to check my notes. But it seemed like in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, there was a safety in the box a lot. And so maybe that is, to your point, their answer.
Yeah.
It seems like either Rudy Ford especially, and even a couple of times Savage, but Rudy Ford seemed to be in the box a lot in the fourth quarter. So, which could be why he ended the game as the leading tackler.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Savage should be a guy who can play those edges. And he did. I mean, he had a couple of nice tackles again. There was a tackle in the left side. I can't remember the play exactly, but I think it was like a second down or third down, and he's sprinting over there, and I'm thinking, oh, this is the classic Darnell Savage miss, and he got the guy down. It's just a really good tackle, and that's what they need from him. That'll slow down the edge.
Mm-hmm. And he missed a couple of those in the first half and then made them in the second. In fact, I mean, that last play before the Saints kicked a field goal, they swung one left and Darnell Savage came up and made the tackle. If the guy gets away from Savage, he probably picks up the first down. They could keep driving or at the very least get a much shorter field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he only ended up picking up like 2 or 3 yards on that play because of Savage's tackle, which to your point was on the edge. So maybe we'll see more and more of that from him, stop keeping him deep and maybe bring him up a little bit. The punt return for a touchdown, I can only imagine Rich Bisaccia's reaction because it was textbook. He had a wall, he had a lane, he took it.
Terrible punt.
Terrible punt. Only guy he had to outrun was Daniel Whelan. That looked like a baby giraffe out there.
Woo.
Daniel Whelan trying to tackle that guy.
Looked like a man in quicksand.
And so, I mean, is this a problem or was that an anomaly?
I don't know. We don't have enough data to figure that out. I mean, we saw inside the dome, he kicked the crap out of the ball.
And it was windy today.
And he did, manage after that to be, nail them inside the 20 twice. Yeah. I don't know. The punt for me, it wasn't where it was. It just wasn't enough hang time.
Or distance, really. I mean,
yeah, what was it, like a 40-yard punt?
Yeah.
So it just wasn't a good punt. But just because it's not a good punt doesn't mean you shouldn't stop the guy. But it was blocked beautifully.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it off the foot, and my thought was, oh, boy. I mean, it was a punt that was begging for a return.
Yeah.
40 yards, low-line drive is not what you want to do in this league. So I do think that overwhelming majority, it was a bad punt. I'm not saying that Daniel Whelan's a bad punter. We have seen him have a big leg, but he mishit the crap out of that one. And that's what happens when you mishit the crap out of a punt at this level. Give a guy a running start, he's bound to take it back on you. So, but this is 2 straight weeks where the special teams, Rich Bisaccia's special teams, have had a pretty glaring issue. The delay of game penalty to open the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know at the time it was going to be a 1-point game, but if they are able to kick that 51-yard field goal, that's 3 points in a 1-point game. Mm-hmm. Delay of game penalties never happen before field goals. That's not supposed to happen. And now a punt return for touchdown. So this special teams is not where it needs to be right now.
Let's flip to the other side of the punt returns. We saw Jaden Reed come off the field and Keyshawn Nixon take back over punt returns as the game wore on. Do you think that's an indictment on Jaden Reed, or did they just want a little bit more burst, a little bit more experience in such a close game?
I think they just were looking for a spark, just like using him on offense for a play.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my impression of it. And maybe Reed was playing a lot of snaps, and they decided to give him a break. I don't know.
Nixon did get his play on offense. He's been asking for it for a while. Jet sweep, picked up a first down.
Yeah, picked up a first down. Impressive.
I mean, this kid is a spark.
How did, and they did it pretty smartly because they brought him out there and then they ran the play pretty quickly. They got up to the line of scrimmage and didn't really give the Saints time to say, hey,
he's not supposed to be out here.
The ball's going to 25 here. Exactly. He wouldn't be out here otherwise.
Let's see what he gets to do next. I mean, at this point, he's punt return, kick return, defense. He's played a snap on offense. He's just got to play quarterback, right?
Well, shoot, maybe he should be the starting running back on Thursday.
He hit that edge quick.
Aaron Jones is in there.
He hit that edge pretty quick. Of course, he got picked on in the locker room afterwards. Darnell Savage was like, if he had really been done it good, he would have scored. He's like, next time, that's what he's got to do next time. But to your point, Ryan, we're seeing Matt LaFleur have some fun. Sure, put Keyshawn Nixon out there on offense. Let's see what happens. Very short week, but actually before we move on to the Detroit Lions, there is something that we do still need to discuss. This was an 18-17 win because really, it's not even saying like largely, it was because of the decision to go for 2 after the first touchdown. At the time, you're sitting there going, okay, yes, I can kind of see it. I saw something on Twitter afterwards, Spoon, that said apparently analytics say down 14, you always go for 2. Have you heard? It
makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, what I was saying was why are they going for 2? I was so confused initially because I'm just I'm 36 years old. I've been watching football my entire life. You don't go for 2 there. Right. That's not what you do. That's very unconventional. And then about 5 seconds later, I thought about it. I was like, oh, that's smart. Because
you do the math.
He's playing the total game instead of it's chess. I mean, he's looking moves ahead instead of one possession, one move at a time. If they're going to win this game, which is the entire objective, no matter how unlikely 17-0 in the fourth quarter is, 17-3, 17-9 at that point, no matter how unlikely it is, you're still playing to win the game. Not to be Herm Edwards, but that's what you're doing. That you've got to, if you got 2 shots to make it from the 2, you got to make one of them. So 50-50, right? If you don't make it here on the first one, you still have another shot. 2 shots from the 2, you should be able to make. You should be able to make one of the 2 shots from the 2. If you make the first, which they did, all you need is the extra point then. And I'll tell you this, too. It inspired a lot of belief on that sideline when they did get it. Josh Myers told me point blank. I asked him, when was the point that you realized that this improbable thing was actually real? He said 2-point conversion. Like that was the moment. And so that there's the intangible factor, too. But just from a big picture standpoint, it was the right call. That's what you should do.
Matt LaFleur even said, he's got Connor Lewis, their analytics guy, always in his ears, always saying, go for two, go for two, go for two. And yeah, it makes sense because if you don't get it, you're down 17-9. You could still tie the game with a 2-point conversion the next time. Something that I thought was very interesting that Matt LaFleur said about the 2-point conversion was he was like, I didn't necessarily like the play call, but it was just something we had to get in. And he said, I knew if nothing else, our quarterback has proven all day he can make off-schedule plays and off-schedule throws. And that's exactly what it was. Asked Torrey, were you even the read in that play? And he was like, no, it was total scramble drill. And
didn't you say it was a read option?
No, that was the 1-yard touchdown.
Oh, that was a touchdown.
I watched the replay back on that, and for me, there weren't a lot, but one of the eye-popping plays that Jordan Love made to me was the 2-point conversion, where he is flushing right and able to see the field all the way back. And if you look, Marshawn Lattimore fell asleep just a little bit. Not a lot, but he fell asleep just a little bit, as like a cornerback on the backside of a 2-point conversion might, because, that's normal to do. Mm-hmm. And he recognized that and fired an absolute missile across the field to the outside shoulder, away from Lattimore, before Lattimore could react to Toure. That was a really impressive play in a very big moment that really, it changed the game at that point. So I thought that was one of the better plays Jordan Love made.
And he could have maybe ran it in. He kind of had a lane there, but he took the more sure shot that he saw that we didn't see there to Toure for the 2-point conversion. And Matt LaFleur said that play was when he knew that they were going to win that game. And he also said he said, you've got a locker room of people that believe in Jordan Love because of that stuff, because of that play, moments like that. Is that one of those moments too, Spoon, where you just if you put your trust in your team, even if it doesn't work out, it can maybe, especially in such a young team, you tell them hey, I've got trust in you to make this.
Yeah, I think it does. I think every big play that he makes, builds off each other. So yeah, I think that gives them confidence. The more that he puts them in the end zone, the more, they're going to trust him and think that he is kind of the guy who can do that.
I meant more from the perspective of Matt LaFleur. Can it help a young team to say, okay, our coach trusts us to go for two here, without our two best playmakers on the field?
Yeah, that and doing the flea flicker stuff, players like that kind of stuff. I think it kind of shows some confidence in them,
Yeah, that throwback, gosh, that was so funny.
That reminded me, I hate to bring my age into this again. But
we already know you're old.
There was a great play that University of Wisconsin did in 1984 or something like that. It was the exact same play, only they purposely threw it into the dirt. But it was backwards to Al Toon, who was this wide receiver, went on to play for the Jets. And so it's a lateral, but he catches it off a bounce and acts like it's incomplete. And then he picks it up and throws it down for a touchdown.
Interesting.
Maybe that's actually what they were trying to do.
Yeah, it was really cool. And actually, I think it was the quarterback who caught the touchdown. But so Love could have picked that up, and he really should have hit the guy, except I think he slipped.
He was doing the splits as he threw it. Yeah. But that's 2 weeks or 2 times now. It happened in week 1, and then it happened again today, where the play sort of fell apart, and it could have been an absolute disaster. And in week 1, Love gets a huge pickup out of it to Musgrave. Today, it's an incompletion. It could have been a completion, but it could have been a lot worse.
I will say, I think in 3 games, that play is the only time I've actually seen Jordan Love panic. And, kind of understandably so, because it was a fumble. But give the Saints defensive front credit for not quitting on the play like they did in Wisconsin in 1867 or whatever year that was. They forced a hurried throw, but I still thought he had time to set his feet. And
Yeah.
the reason he slipped was because he was going too fast. And so that to me was the one time that I saw him panic. But if he was to set his feet, Dontavian Wicks is still wide open.
Yeah.
He was standing in De Pere.
Yeah. And standing in De Pere.
He was wide open.
Okay. Short week to get ready for a division opponent. Detroit Lions come in on Thursday. How important is it to get back Aaron Jones and Christian Watson for this game?
And David Bakhtiari. And Devondre Campbell.
Jair
Alexander.
Especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I don't know what their thinking was, and they would deny it up and down. But I got to think they thought, okay, 2 games in 4 days, which is the one we want the most.
Absolutely.
Like if we can play these guys one game, which one do we want the most? And it's Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect – I'm surprised Jones didn't play today. I thought, what I saw in practice, he looked okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that tells me that maybe they held him out for this. I don't know. Christian Watson, I have no idea. We don't get to see him do anything, really. So I have no idea what his status is. And then Bakhtiari's going to be, so much for the grass turf theory, that just because they're on grass, he's going to play. I think people are going to have to get used to Rasheed Walker being the left tackle.
So I think that unequivocally the most important player in that group to return is Aaron Jones.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a wide gap from him to anyone else because they have no running game without Aaron Jones. And against the Lions especially, who have a very good running game, you'd like to slow that down if you can. So Aaron Jones, and not say nothing of the fact that he's one of the best receiving backs in the league too, he is the engine to that offense. They need him back as soon as possible. Christian Watson, I've got to think if there's no setback that he plays Thursday night. Because otherwise, why not put him on IR? If you put someone on IR, they have to miss 4 games, and then they can return. Yeah. For Christian Watson, this is the 4th game. So I've got to think he plays Thursday night, and I wouldn't be surprised they sat him for David Bakhtiari. It's not even flip a coin at this point. One, David Bakhtiari completely debunked the turf thing during the week. This is a knee issue. It's not getting better. It will never get better. This is a condition that will stay the same. I have no idea when he's going to play, when he's not going to play. I don't think the Packers do either.
This is the information we have now. He plays a game, and it screws up his knee. Yeah. So that's what we know now. Now the next question is, how long does it take him to get over playing 1 game? So I think we're getting an idea of what his availability is going to be all year.
And it's not getting better at 31, 32, whatever he is. And importantly, David Bakhtiari acknowledged that he was feeling something in his knee in Chicago. And it's not the first time he's played through something. He says his knee has a limit. When it hits the limit, that's the limit. But up into that limit, he can play. Even if it's, not feeling great, he'll be out there. And that's kind of how Chicago went. So it's not like, despite barely practicing in camp, it's not like he came in 100%. That's just the reality.
The question is, okay, so if they're uncertain about what he's going to be able to give them, what do? Do they cut him? They put him on IR? Really, they don't gain much by cutting him from salary cap standpoint. I mean, he's got a $1.2 million base salary, and 3 weeks of that is already off of it. So you don't need to cut him to get salary cap room. Maybe it's just worth hanging on, and maybe, the last month of the season, you sit them all of December and you somehow make the playoffs, and you're like, all right, let's use them for the playoffs. Or, you get to the Super Bowl and save them for that. That's crazy, but you know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't hurt to keep him around unless he's a distraction.
He's like in the NBA, that old veteran that used to be an incredible scorer, used to be a microwave, could fill it up, that just doesn't have the bounce anymore, and you put him on the bench. But you never know when he can pop off for 30.
Yeah.
You never know. And so you keep him on the bench just for that special night and hope that special night comes at a big moment when you need it. That's kind of what David Bakhtiari is now.
Yeah, or he's Kirk Gibson and he limps up to left tackle and has the game of his life.
You never know. Let me also pose this. and I don't think this has anything to do with David Bakhtiari. This is just a separate discussion. They've used up their elevations for Patrick Taylor.
Yeah.
He's been elevated 3 times now. And, he was elevated even week 1 when Aaron Jones was fine. Do we see him get signed to the roster this week? And who's the casualty?
I think it depends on Aaron Jones's availability. They could get away with waiting another week.
Yeah.
They also have to get a spot for Eric Stokes, who's going to be eligible next week, although they'll probably practice him for a couple of weeks before they activate him. So, yeah, I don't know. There's some spots at the end of the bench that they can, right now it doesn't, nobody comes to mind for me right now.
Do you need to hold? Did they put Tenuta on IR?
Yes, he's on IR.
Oh, okay, so that's not a
It's
possibility.
another spot they're going to want to probably keep at some point.
Okay.
Royce Newman played himself into a starting job, so, he's not a guy they're going to get rid of.
Jonathan Owens?
Possibly that's a guy. Yeah, he didn't help himself with a holding penalty tonight.
I think the past 2 weeks, the only time he's gotten in the box score is a penalty on special teams.
Yeah, so that's a possibility.
We'll miss you, Simone. I'm trying to think
My
of who
brain's
else.
fried, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't even think of that.
Yeah, I need to. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that
Check
one on
in
the next
with me
podcast.
on
Yeah.
next podcast.
Well, your brain's fried. We've got a short week. I'm going to go ahead and land this plane. We will continue to have full wrap-up coverage from the Packers' 18-17 win over the New Orleans Saints on PackersNews.com. Stop yawning, Spoon. We are almost done. And then we will be back here tomorrow for a full day. No open practices this week to the media.
Really?
Yeah. Check the schedule.
Yeah, I think because they only do walkthroughs anyways. They don't
Okay.
No, so that it must be.
So
no
we
real practice.
we really will just be flying blind with Aaron Jones and Christian Watson.
Everything will be an estimation.
Yeah,
That's what they
exactly.
do.
So I will give you each your final 60 seconds. Spoon? It can be about anything.
Like players say, on to the next game. That's kind of where I'm at with this game. I'm like, I don't know what to make of that game.
Yeah.
It was a victory, and Jordan Love did what he had to do. They did what they had to do. I don't know what effect losing Derek Carr did. To me, it's just like on to Detroit, and Detroit's the game will measure them,
Well, they lost a game they shouldn't have lost last week, and they won a game they shouldn't have won this week. So I guess it's evened out. They're 2-1, and it's awfully impressive, all things considered. Where they go from here, I have no idea.
And honestly, if you come out of this first 4-game stretch 2-2, it's about where we kind of thought they could be. So, not bad to get started. And then you get a mini bye because you don't have to play again until the Monday night of the next. Yeah, for real.
Goodness.
So yeah, we will, like I said, be here all week for the Packers short week, getting ready for the Detroit Lions. Full wrap-up coverage from this game on PackersNews.com. Guys, thank you as always. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.